Today we're going to read the very famous poem, The Solitary Reaper by William Wordsworth, as an example of a romantic poem. And why are we talking about The Solitary Reaper? Because this work can be seen as an embodiment of whatever Wordsworth meant by his theory of poetry. So we know this is a landmark work, and this can, though it's a very simple poem on the surface, if we try and analyze it, we can see that this totally explains what Wordsworth means by poetry, the business of writing poetry, and how we are supposed to enjoy a poetic creation. So, reading The Solitary Reaper as a romantic poem. Now, The Solitary Reaper is a part of the Lyrical Ballads, the compilation, the book Lyrical Ballads that came out in 1798, jointly published by William Wordsworth and Samuel Taylor Coleridge. And this work can be seen as a landmark, officially inaugurating the Romantic Revival or the Romantic movement in English literature. So his example, the example of theory of poetry as expounded in the preface to the Lyrical Ballads can be seen in this poem. And we can see the poem is set against a rural landscape, and it's not just a backdrop, but then there is a dynamic interaction between man and nature. So when you look at Wordsworth and his poetry, we can say that nature is the cornerstone of all that he's saying and he's trying to tell his reader. For him, nature is the most important aspect, and this union between man and nature, human beings and nature, forms the cornerstone of his poetry. So, what appears as a very interesting, captivating, alluring scene in the poem, it intervenes in the poet's perspective, and then there is a change. It is transported to a different plane, different level altogether. So when you look at the poem, you can see that you can divide the poem into three stages or three sections, and there is a gradual development. So there is a plan, a kind of a scheme behind the way the poem is written. So the first section, when you look at it, we get introduced to a lonely girl, the solitary reaper who is working in the field, who is totally absorbed in her work. She's singing a song to herself, and the song is giving her company when she's doing her work. So the entire valley is filled with this beautiful song that this girl is singing. And the poet, he happens to overhear the thing. So he is more or less like an intruder, but then he's standing aside and watching the whole thing. He's watching the whole scene unfold in front of him. So he's enthralled and he's enchanted. So it is so captivating, and he's arrested by the whole scenic beauty of the whole thing. He stands there and he watches the whole thing. Now, coming to the second section, we find that there is a description about the solitary reaper's song. So her song is compared with the melodious songs of birds. It is so beautiful, it is so mellifluous. So this expresses the spiritual ecstasy experienced by the poet. The second section takes us to a different plane altogether. So in the first section, we find he is present there physically, and he is watching as well as listening, watching the girl working and the girl singing the song, listening to the girl singing. And in the second stage, what happens is there is a kind of an upliftment that he experiences, wherein it can be compared to a spiritual ecstasy, wherein he simply forgets his own being. And then this is brought about by the song of the girl. So this level of sublimity, where the song surpasses anything that he has ever heard, this metamorphosis of the entire scene to a sublime level happens. And then when we are trying to understand what he's talking about, we need to keep in mind the theory of the primeval purity of mind that Rousseau spoke about. Rousseau also spoke about the importance of nature. the need to return to nature. So proximity with nature is a precondition to attain this kind of sublimity. That is, if you want to be raised to this level of sublimity as well as ecstasy, you need to be in touch with nature. So that is a precondition. So in the second section, there is a merger as in a coming together of the girl, the song, the valley, and the poet. So all these different disparate elements, they are fused together. They are fused together in such a beautiful manner that it becomes kind of an epiphanic fusion. An epiphanic fusion, as in it's kind of a revelation wherein he forgets who he is and what the whole thing is about. It's a different plane altogether into which he is taken to. And the third stage is the highest peak, or you could say the highest flight of fantasy, wherein he's trying to guess the meaning of the song. And the whole poetry, the whole narration here becomes a meta narrative. A meta narrative as to how to read a poem, if you have to put it in the words of the famous critic Terry Eagleton. So this section is a poem becoming self-conscious, being conscious about itself. That is how to write a poem, or what a poem should be, or what a poet should be doing using his craft. So this section can be seen as a meta-narrative. So a poem about a poem. So a meta-narrative on how to read a poem. And then he stays there for some time, that bliss of oblivion, wherein he is one with the song, one with the beautiful surroundings. And after that, there is a slow descent into reality, a descent into the earthly affairs from the heights of spiritual exaltation. So there is this anticipation of weary times. And this anticipation is after this mystical bliss of being at one with the entire creation. So what we see, the trajectory that we see is that of he's taking flight. Slowly he sees the girl. That is the moment in which he is induced into this state. So he sees the girl, and that becomes an occasion wherein he loses himself into that world, into that girl's world where she is singing and doing her work, she is reaping. And then slowly he climbs into that epiphanic moment of fusion, wherein the girl's song, the beautiful valley around him, the poet himself, everything is fused into one sublime, beautiful whole. And he is lost in contemplation, he is lost there, reaching that point of sublimity, the highest that a person can reach. So he stays there for some time. Then every flight of fantasy has to come to an end. And so you can see that slowly he is coming down, a kind of a denouement, wherein slowly he comes back to reality. So this coming back to reality also reminds him that there is a world outside there. There are bills to be paid, your daily drudgeries to be lived and experienced, all those kind of things. There is no running away from the harsh realities of life. So that acknowledgement is there. This coming down. So there's no regret that he has to come back and he would rather stay back. That is not there. But then there is a slow acceptance of the things that are going to be there. So the anticipation is there when he is coming down. So finally, when you look at it, what is he talking about? This meta-narrative about poetry. So a romantic poem, as we have seen, is deeply inspired and influenced by nature. It takes a lot of creativity. You have to lose yourself into what you are trying to write about. So harmony of a far superior kind is created when the girl, the valley, and the poet, they blend into a unique experience, transcending the mundane, reaching towards a rapport with the surroundings through the alchemy of imagination. So imagination is kind of alchemic. So there is a fusion coming together of all these very, very different elements, but then it creates a unified whole. So unified whole is the poem. The poem, the whole beauty of the poem, into which the reader gets lost. So when you look at the structure, you have the poem opening in the mundane, the rural, nothing very extraordinary about it. It's just a rural girl going about her daily task. That's all. And she's singing some song, something melancholic, something mellifluous. That's all. There's nothing extraordinary about it. What makes it extraordinary is this level of sublimity that is achieved by the poet. And how is he able to do that? This is possible because there is a beautiful fusion of all these disparate elements. For that, you need to use your mind's eye, you need to use your creative imagination. So in the second stage, you have the metamorphosis, and finally you have a coming back, you have a coming down into the mundane world. But then when you come down to the mundane world, you become richer for the experience, you become a better person, a richer person, wherein you will be better prepared to face the vagaries of time, the drudgeries of daily existence. So, nature, both the independent and in the form of a benign influence in the drama of human life, forms the cornerstone of Wordsworth's aesthetic. So, this is how we are supposed to look at the solitary reaper as an example of Wordsworth's idea about poetry. So this becomes a meta-narrative, a poem that is self-conscious and talking about itself. So all that fusion, so all we need to remember is it's like a trajectory, a flight of fantasy. You undertake that journey, you stay in that suspended state of wonder and amazement, and then slowly you come down. Thank you very much. Thank you for watching.